Welcome back, I'm Kimberly, and this is Floral Art Review, where we use our AI, DesignEye, to analyse the competition design of mine from previous years and give us an idea of how it meets the principles and elements of design, which is how we are generally judged in competitions, as well as some suggestions for improvement. This week we have a design that was titled White Christmas. Now, for those of you who know the Australian conditions, you know that it's very rare for us indeed to have a white Christmas in terms of snow. We might have a whiteout in terms of bushfire smoke, but certainly not snow. It is almost Christmas time here as I record this, and today, in fact, it is getting close to 40 degrees, which is well over the 100 mark in Fahrenheit terms. So it is hot, and we're a week out from Christmas, and it's only going to get hotter. So White Christmas is a challenge for me to look at, because really what I know of White Christmas in its traditional sense is movies, visiting other countries at this time of year and enjoying a white Christmas, a snowy Christmas that way. So what I had hoped to do was to reflect some of the fact that a white Christmas to me always engenders thoughts of peaceful time, a quiet time, a reflective time. And so I wanted to make the design look that way. What I've used is a silver dish, it's a plate in fact, and so it's got a little bit of a bowl to it, which means that the edges of it are lifted up away from the bench itself. So I didn't need to put anything else underneath it, because the edge of the design, as you look at it, looks like it's above the bench, so you don't have that contrast directly against the black of the bench. Inside of that, I've got a little piece of tree stump, and that's covered with hessian. And then I've used the silver and blue glittery balls that you would normally get on a Christmas tree, taken the tops off a lot of them and cut them down just a little bit, cut the neck of that ball down a little bit, and then filled them with water. And that is my water source. And that's something that I do traditionally at this time of the year. A lot of workshops I do, I'll show people how to use the Christmas balls for table centres and for all sorts of arrangements, using them as the water source so that you can glue them or attach them to whatever you are using and have that water source to replace, to put the fresh flowers in. So I've used white roses, and I've used some fatsia leaves, I think they are. I don't think they're anthuriums. I can't remember. It's a little bit time ago. But the backdrop of the design itself is a candelabra, and I have covered it with alternating with white wool and with jute string to match up with the hessian. So I've got a very muted and very restrained colour palette, so that the highlights become the movement in the design, not necessarily the colour in the design. The design didn't place, and I think what the judges were looking for was something that mimicked snow, that looked a bit more like the expected interpretation of White Christmas. I was happy with the design at the time. Looking at it now, which is it's probably 5 years ago now since I did this, I can see that there are some gaps in it in terms of continuity of the design. So it looks a little bit like two designs, one across the base and one at the top of the design. The base plate itself I don't think is wide enough for the design. I haven't got the proportions quite right, because it's circular, and I've said this in many other videos as well. The width and the depth, you have to make a very definite decision about width or depth being one of those ratios, and with a circle it's hard, because the circle is the same all the way around, so you mustn't restrict yourself to the circle width and depth wise unless you absolutely have to for a competition, because you're not going to get the ratios right. So let us see what the analysis says about this particular design, and then what we could do, I could do, the royal we, what I could do to improve the design. Our overall first impression from our DesignEye AI, White Christmas is a restrained contemporary floral design that successfully evokes a modern festive atmosphere through a limited colour palette, strong vertical emphasis, and the thoughtful integration of non-botanical materials. The design feels calm, intentional, and seasonally appropriate, with a quiet elegance rather than overt decoration. So exactly what I was looking for in the design. I didn't want it to shout, yeah, gaudy Christmas multicolour. I wanted it to be that peaceful, reflective time. So it looks like I've managed that in the overall assessment of the design. Let's look now at the individual principles and elements of design and see what I have done with those. Line, first of all. Strong vertical lines dominate the composition created by the upright stems and supporting framework. These lines lead the eye upward and give the design height and presence. The secondary curved line is introduced through the placement of foliage and hanging ornaments, softening the rigidity of the vertical structure. So that's in terms of the curving lines. There's the curving lines of the candelabra itself. There's the curving lines of the foliage, but also the placement of the stem. There's a couple of longer stemmed roses, and I've curved them specifically to match the curves of the other material that's in the design. Form. The design is primarily linear, with clustered mass at the base. This contrast between vertical extension and grounded floral groupings reinforces the contemporary style while maintaining stability. So what it's saying there is that if it was a traditional design, it would be more of the massing at the base would need to be reflected by massing somewhere else. If it was modern, if it was a traditional design, it would need to be filled in a lot more, so a lot less negative space than is in it. So the form is right for a contemporary design. Colour. The palette is deliberately limited to white, silver and green. White flowers convey purity and seasonal clarity. Silver accents add a festive and reflective quality, and the green foliage provides the necessary contrast and depth. So it's about the depth of that green and the fact that the placements have given me a little bit of shading on them as well, so that it gives your eye a chance to rest. It's not being bombarded by glitter, by shiny, by the white, which can be quite dominant in a design. There's a palette of colours that you travel through when you look at the design. Texture. A pleasing interplay of textures is evident, with smooth foliage, soft petals, rough hessian and glossy metallic ornaments. This variation adds interest without overwhelming the simplicity of the design. So those of you who have followed a few of the videos will know that texture has become my go-to element to focus on in designs. At this point in my design journey, I probably wasn't as focused, and I tended to put too much emphasis on the class title without thinking more deeply about the actual design principles and elements. So I can see myself, the journey that I've taken in the time since I did this design, and that is rewarding because we all learn. We're all on a journey of improving our designs. Space. Negative space is used effectively, particularly around the vertical elements. This openness allows each component to be clearly read and enhances the contemporary aesthetic. So what we've got there is something that I have talked often about in these videos. It's about the negative space. So the space between the placings that you make becomes part of the design. So where I said at the beginning of the design that I felt like it could fall into the trap of being two designs, one at the bottom, one at the top, because we've got some elements in that middle section that are reflected in the other two, it doesn't quite fall into that trap at this point in time, but I think there needs to be a little bit of improvement in there. But it's about the fact that the negative space is there as a breather, so your eye can still move through it. It's still part of the design rather than being separate from the design. Balance. The design achieves asymmetrical balance. While the vertical structure is dominant, the placement of foliage, ornaments and base materials counterbalances the height, preventing the design from feeling top-heavy. Now it's true of the design. My concern is that the base plate is not adding to that balance. It's just too narrow, a little bit wider and I would feel more comfortable with the overall balance of the design. And it would take away that sense of the base being quite dominant and heavy. So that's something that I would look at anyway. We'll keep moving along with these principles and elements and see what the suggestions are at the end. Proportion and scale. The scale relationship between the tall linear elements and the compact floral base is generally effective. The base anchors the design, although the vertical components slightly dominate the overall composition. See, I completely disagree with that. I think the vertical components are important, and the foliage certainly adds that feeling of dominance to the top of the design. But for me, it's the base that I need to do something about. Rhythm. Repetition of white blooms and silver ornaments creates visual rhythm and continuity, guiding the eye smoothly from the base to the top. So in terms of the placements, so it's the plant materials, so the white roses have a path. Yeah, I am waving my hands around again when I'm trying to do the video. And also the baubles, not dominantly, but reflecting that movement of the plant material as well, moving up through the design. Contrast. Contrast is achieved through material choices rather than colour. Natural versus metallic, matte versus reflective, soft versus structured, adding sophistication to the design. And so I have talked previously in other videos about contrast and about often we look for contrast in texture or in colour, and this time it's been the contrast of the material choices. So it's kind of a textural contrast, but not overtly a textural contrast, because it all blends in together so well because it's in that limited colour palette. Unity and harmony. A cohesive theme is maintained throughout. All elements support the white Christmas concept with no extraneous materials distracting from the overall narrative. So what it's saying there is that everything is working together. So the base plate, the hessian, the repetition of the baubles, the white of the roses, the green of the foliage, and limiting it to those colours and that plant material means that it all falls into, all falls into that one harmonious design. And that is most definitely what I wanted out of the design. I wanted it to be harmonious and calming and reflective. So let's now have a look at what our AI has decided should be the improvements for the design. First of all, refine the vertical dominance. Slightly reducing the height or strengthening the base mass could enhance proportional balance. So it's this proportional balance that I have been concerned about all the way through. And I think what I would do, as I said, is I would make the base plate larger, wider, so that it was a better triangular shape from the top down to the sides of the plate and across the plate. I just think that that is going to enhance it further. And because I would have that wider edge to the plate, I would have to think about bringing some of the foliage out across that. So rather that base piece of foliage that is facing forward, I'd probably have that facing a little bit more of an angle, not completely sideways, but more reflective, almost shadowing the two that are above it, and bringing it across the edge of the plate so that it breaks up the plate, but it pushes that base proportion out a bit further as well. Definitely something I'd try. Clarify the focal emphasis. Introducing a subtle focal point, perhaps a slightly more open bloom or a distinct ornament placement would strengthen visual hierarchy. What it's saying there is that everything is equal in terms of its placements, and so there's no hierarchical order of the placements or the individual pieces of plant material. So I think what I could do is have a couple of larger of the baubles as the water sources, because they're all the same size, the balls that are in it. And I think it needs, it would be enhanced by having a larger placement, and perhaps the larger placement is going to work with that first suggestion of having a larger placement out on one side of the design, so that it gives you a subtle focal point, not a dominant focal point, but somewhere that you're drawn to and then you're drawn back because you see it repeated, that form or that texture repeated through the design, and so you're brought back to the design to have a look at it. But there's a sizing variation that I think it needs. I think that's right. Enhance the flow. A more deliberate transition between the base and the vertical elements could improve movement and cohesion. So this is what I talked about when we were talking about the negative space, and I felt that there was a bit too much of a gap between the base and the next lot of placements. I need something more of a transition, so probably what I need is one of the rose heads about halfway up in that gap, because there's still going to be space around it, still negative space around it, but it looks like you move, the movement would be from all of the placements at the base that are all pretty much in the same level, then coming up to that one, then up to the others through the design. So I think it's just missing one placement where near where the ball is at the side of the design, underneath the middle leaf, shall we say. So there is our analysis and our suggestions for improvement for this design, White Christmas. If you would like your own designs analysed, you just need to go to the website, follow the instructions there. Within about 24 hours, you'll have a written report back to you. It is looked at by a human judge as well, just to make sure that we've had the right plant material identified, or that it makes sense to you in terms of the cohesion and the suggestions of what it's talking about. It is designed to help you on your floral art journey, as it does with me and continues to do with me. So I leave you thinking about White Christmas and your own designs. I'm Kim Bailey, and this is Floral Art Review.